Good morning, because here in Brazil it is 11 now. Good morning to everyone. We are going to talk a little bit about the challenges that Brazil is facing. What after the March 2020, when this coronavirus pandemic started here in Brazil. But the important question to say at the beginning, that is that the Brazilian economy was already in a process of stagnation before the coronavirus pandemic. After the crisis, in the financial crisis in 2008, indeed the Brazilian economy was experiencing a very good period of growth because of all the financial expansion that we have because of the role of public banks. So if you notice here in the graph, 2010 was a very good year, despite the financial crisis in the world. But this was only a very short period, 2010, 2011. Then after 2012, we have really problems to maintain the keep of the rate of growth. And 2014 and 2016 were really very bad years for the Brazilian economy. That is why, because all the sustainability of the economic growth was put in question. From 2004, since the beginning of Lula's government to Dilma's impeachment, the growth of the Brazilian economy was based mainly on consumption and exports, and no investment was really the pillar of growth. So we have this challenge in Brazil. We need to restart a long-term process of growth based on investment, but we have a lot of difficulties to do this. That is why we are putting all the expectations in terms of consumption and exports. In terms of the long trend of GDP per capita, indeed, the Workers' Party government was really outstanding. We have a very different policy in terms of the minimum wage rate, and this makes a lot of difference in terms of the GDP per capita long trend. This is important to say, because this is completely different nowadays, mainly after the pandemic. So this long trend in terms of GDP per capita, I think that it is over. It is over in Brazil. When we compare this stagnation trend, what happened indeed after March, we notice that we have a recession here in Brazil. We have a recession, a very deep recession in the first semester, and then in the second semester it was a little bit smooth, but we ended the year with a fall of 4% in terms of the GDP. And in terms of unemployment, we have an employment, but it is important to say that the unemployment rate was already high. The unemployment rate was already high at the beginning of the year. We have an employment rate of almost 12% at the beginning of 2020. So we only maintain and increase this trend, but the trend was already there because of the stagnation of the economy. But in spite of the stimulus that was the interest rate policy, because since 2000 and because of the crisis after 2017, we have been diminishing the rate of interest. But despite this fall in the rate of interest, the central bank policy rate, we have no investment, and the unemployment grew. There was a growth in unemployment. So this is a challenge to the economic theory, né? Because we, despite the liquidity, as Keynes said, despite liquidity, we have no good expectations in terms of profits, in terms of investment. There is a lot of uncertainty about the legal framework in Brazil, and that is postponing any kind of decision, And when started the pandemic, there was an emergency, there's emergency financial help that it had a very deep impact in terms of consumption. I think that in terms of the economic growth, we have a fall of 4% in the year, but if we had not had this emergency financial help, the fall would be deeper. This financial help was almost achieved 42 million people in Brazil, almost 20% of the population. But during 3 months, we have this help of $120, that is almost half minimum wage. And then during 3 months, we have half of this, $60. This help finished in December. December was the last month that that the 42 million people received this help. But nowadays, they have started a negotiation in terms of what is going to happen, because the pandemic is growing here in Brazil. We have a lot of death every week. So there is a discussion about what is going to happen in terms of the emerging financial help. Despite these results in terms of economic growth, the stock market, the stock market was really speculative during all the year of 2020. I remember Oscar's talking about the commodities in the last meeting, and this speculation was completely um, um, s- um, I think that we can say that was overwhelmed the behavior of the stock market, because there were not signs in the economy that this stock market could behave like this. So I think that we have this combination of recession, the financial emergency help in terms of that supported consumption, but a lot of speculation in the stock markets. And at the same time, we have a deep concern in terms of the gross public debt. The gross public debt was growing, was already growing, because this is important. We have already some trends in the Brazilian economy. One of these was the growth of the public debt, despite the fall of the central bank interest rate. So this is important, and this is today a challenge, because the amount of money that was spent in the financial help was not expected in the budget. So it was a plus in the budget that put more pressure in terms of the sustainability of the gross public debt. In terms of the capital net flows, we have at the very beginning of the pandemic, we have lost capital flows. There were outflows, and then we received money, but then we lost again at the end of the year. That explains in part what Oscar was saying also last meeting about the evolution of the Brazilian exchange rate. And these capital flows are really very unstable today. At the beginning of the year, we have no confidence in terms of what is going to happen in 2021. Indeed, we have some signals that many corporations are thinking about leaving Brazil and going to Argentina, for example. Some of them are thinking about leaving because they are expecting that the management of the gross public debt will put pressure on taxes, that will have more taxes in the future. So they are trying to anticipate this trend, and they are leaving Brazil. So Ford and other ones are thinking about going to Argentina. Uh, The exchange rate, as I said, stabilized in a very high level. It is the level that is, as we saw in the last meeting, it is higher than any other country in Latin America. And it is expected that it will continue like this, because the central bank has lost a lot of reserves trying to manage this, but they decided not to lose reserves anymore. So they are not going to make interventions in the exchange rate market in order to stabilize that is the thinking of the Minister of Finance, that is Guedes, that he believes that it is good. It's a good to not to stabilize the exchange rate, and then let's see what happens with the exchange, and the macroeconomic scenario has to adjust to this exchange rate.
Maria, we should, yeah, you've already about 10 minutes, so
Yes.
yeah.
So we have the balance of trade, and then what is important to say here, that we have lost a lot of the industrial participation in the GDP has been falling during the not the long trend. So we have this has been important in the pandemic, because we have not capacity of creating jobs. We have not capacity of creating jobs in the industry. And we have a scenario where the Brazilian exports, mainly raw materials and intermediate goods, are what we are producing now and what we are exporting. Some innovation we have in terms of services. There are startups, some in education and in financial services, but they are not interconnected with the industrial GDP. What is important to discuss also here is that in terms of investment, public investment, there is no future for public investments, because, as you say, the amount of GDP in terms of the relation between GDP and debt is already high. But the composition of the expenses of the government um, are not favoring the investments. If you see this pink part is related to investments, more or most of the expenses of the government are operational expenses, and we have, if you consider the interest on the national debt and debt amortization, this is the second more important expenses of the government nowadays. So we have these operational expenses and debt and plus interest expenses that were putting pressure on the GDP. Well, in terms of social impacts, to say something about this, nowadays we have more than 40 million searching for jobs. A new wave of measures related to financial help are being negotiated nowadays, because, as I said, this help, the financial help of 120 and then $60 finished in December. But the problem is that we have no money, because the debt is completely it has achieved 100% of GDP. There are no room for investments. There are no room for more expenses. So they are thinking about new taxes in the short-term scenario. And what is happening in terms of vaccination, that this is really important, because all the expectation that we could have any kind of recovery, the, in terms of consumption and jobs and investment, it was based on the vaccination. The vaccination has been very, very slow. I think that almost 2 million people were vaccinated. So we have 220 million people. So far, we have vaccinated only 2 million. In the state of Sao Paulo, that is the most important state, we have already vaccinated 1 million. So the most of the vaccination is concentrated in the state of Sao Paulo. But what I'm thinking about is the problem that we will have in terms of inequality. As I said to you, in terms of the long trend, of GDP per capita. We have a very outstanding result in the Workers' Party government. Nowadays, we have finished this policy. The government, Bolsonaro finished already this government, and now we have no real increase in terms of the minimum wage. The minimum wage will increase in terms of nominal amount, but not in terms of the real amount. And this affects more than 50 million people. In terms of purchasing power of the minimum wage, the purchasing power is diminishing because we have less real increase in terms of the minimum wage, and at the same time, we have inflation. Now, the inflation nowadays is 5%, is high and mainly concentrated in the basket of foods that poor people buy. These people have access, these poor people have a lot of access to credit before the pandemic. After the pandemic, we have a very deep fall also in terms of the expansion of credit to families. So we have this scenario that it is challenging in terms of the economic and social perspectives, and we have a government. This is important. We have a government that does answers to all this, saying, "So what? It is okay. People die. It is part of life. So we do not need to do any kind of effort to manage this situation." This is what Bolsonaro has been saying since the beginning of the pandemic. He also said that there is no alternative. We need to live in this situation. There's no alternative to policy, not even monetary policy or even fiscal policy. And what has happened in the last week is that the chances of impeachment have diminished. Because 2 weeks ago there was an expectation that perhaps we can have an impeachment of Bolsonaro, but there no way. This week we have a new negotiation in the Congress, and this negotiation has strengthened the center and weakened the other wings. So we have also the PT party is very fragmented now. So this is favoring Bolsonaro. So I think that now we are really in a very bad situation, because this negationism is increasing in Brazil. So, and people is tired to wait for the vaccine. So I do not know. We are really at the crossroads. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. That was great. Let me just go to a different view. Questions. And by the way, we have recorded this, so we will put this question and discussion on the. Yeah, please. Anyone? Aurelia, please.
After Mick. No?
After Mick. Go ahead, Mick.
Let Maria speak. I didn't indicate that I was going to say something.
Okay, go ahead, Aurelia.
Yeah, good morning to all of you. Very nice presentation. I only want to ask you two short questions. The first one is, how can you explain that capitals want to go to Argentina? This is really unbelievable, because Argentina is it's a broken economy. And the other is, how can you explain that Bolsonaro cannot be impeached? Because what you showed is that everything is going wrong, everything. So how can people state Bolsonaro? How can they like Bolsonaro? How can you, how can it be not possible to impeach him? Why is that? Thank you.
Yes, very good, very good questions. And really, I do not know if I have the answers to these questions because some people say that the corporations are thinking about these taxes that will come, and so they are trying to anticipate any kind of loss and go to Argentina. But why Argentina? Why Argentina? I think that another says that Argentina will accept some kind of investments that are not so technological advanced. So nowadays in Brazil, perhaps the next wave of investments will be very innovative. And now Ford is not, because Ford is one of the corporations that is leaving Brazil, and Ford is not interested in investing with technological innovation, and is going to Argentina instead to continue the same kind of technology and try to get money from this. This is part of, yes.
Peter, sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to, maybe I'm going to try and mute. Okay, that helps. So I think there's some background noise, Aurelia, in your house. So I've just muted you, but please unmute yourself when you want to speak. Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
This,
Yeah,
so
my question to Maria is, did you have lockdowns? If yes, how long have they been and how successful?
yeah, we have never had a full lockdown. We
Ah,
have never had a full lockdown. We have short periods of where people are uh, s- have these social distance practices, but never a full lockdown. Brazil has not, because of Bolsonaro, because Bolsonaro has been negated, has been saying that it is kind of flu, that we do not be too much concerned about this flu, and that we need to go on, to keep on, and then we need to accept that life is like this, that people die. So there was no lockdown. There was the tension between some governments and Bolsonaro, some state governments and Bolsonaro, because some state governments would like to have this lockdown. We have never had lockdown.
and
And actually,
does,
I have a, sorry, go ahead,
does,
Peter.
does this mean that there is not a real big influence by the pandemic on the economy?
No, there
Right.
is a lot of, as Ariela said, there is a lot of influence in the economy. There is a lot of influence in the economy, but still,
But it was not the lockdown.
it was not. No, it was.
Okay,
No, it was
Yeah,
not.
good,
in
good.
fact, my question follows on from that because I know that there was not any national lockdown. So, if that's the case, what exactly accounts for the decline in GDP?
Mhm.
Has anybody done a study? And if not, what are your guesses
Yeah.
in terms of what are the major factors that have contributed to this massive knockdown, 10% decline in GDP?
Yeah. At
Radhika, it's Alexander. I have the same question, more or less the same question in chat. Thank
Ah,
you.
okay, great. Thank you.
So at the very beginning of the pandemic, we have no lockdown, but the expectations about the future of the economy made the many business to start to dismiss people, to dismiss people, and this has at the very beginning created a panic, economic panic, but there was no lockdown. No, the lockdown was not the cause of this. The cause of this was were the expectations about the future, because the scenario was completely uncertain about what will happen in terms of the future of this disease in Brazil. So the business scenario was changing. It was an outcome of the business scenario. It was not an outcome of the lockdown. It was an outcome of the business scenario that indeed affected mainly investments, and the consumption was not so much affected because because of the unemployment, the government decided to start this financial help. So we have no lockdown. What we have was social distance. So the business started to practice home office. So a lot of families dismiss the workers, because here in Brazil we have a lot of family workers. This is important. Direct workers. We have more than 3 or 4 million people that live working for families. These people were dismissed in the crisis because the families were concerned about the disease, the public transport, transportation. So this was the result of decisions, private decisions not to hire people, not to start the home office, and many business started to close because many depended on this movement in terms of in the neighborhood of the corporations, or even of building offices. And they were completely without any movement. They closed, and this started a movement of recession, but not because a lockdown, because Bolsonaro always was against a lockdown.
Great. I have Danielle, then I have another question, and if anybody else wants to ask a question, just let me know either through the chat, or John John, Danielle, and Carlos all have questions. I'll let them all go first. Danielle first, then John, then Carlos, and then I have one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you, Maria. My question is about trying to understand why the economy was going down already in 2013, 14, and 15, because I see that even before COVID, it was suffering a lot with GDP going down, debt rising, and unemployment going up. So obviously something happened in 2013 and 14. You can just tell us briefly, because I'm sure it's a very long issue, but I would be curious to understand the background a bit. Thank you.
What happened is, after the crisis of 2008, we continue growing. You saw the data about 2020 and 10 is outstanding. What happened is, this movement was led by public banks. The public banks helped with this movement. We have a lot of credit that came from the public banks. This finished in 2014. This because the public banks were already with a lot of problems in terms of balance sheets. So they stopped the expansion of credit, and this affected the future of the economy. In a moment where this credit was oriented to consumption, and then you started to reduce the level of consumption, but you do not increase the level of investment. What we have in Brazil is a long-term stagnation because of investment. We have no investment because if to increase the level of GDP, we would need 22-23% of investment in terms of the GDP. Nowadays we have 14, 13. So we have no chance of growing with this level. We are maintaining the level of capacity, but we are not growing. We're not growing. We need 22, 23, 10% more in terms of. So what happened was the end of the participation of the big participation of the public banks. That was high, and the end of the stimulus in terms of consumption. This ended. That is why.
Amazing. John, Carlos.
Okay, yeah, first I just wanted to give some information from Maria, which is that the situation in Brazil has been followed rather closely in China. Guanxia.cn, which is the biggest non-state center-left website in China, has already carried 4 articles on the situation in Brazil. The reason for this particularly is because the coronavac virus from China is one of the two vaccines authorized for use in Brazil. And it turned out that the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is the other vaccine which is authorized, actually gets its raw materials from China. So therefore, Brazil is essentially entirely dependent upon China for the supply of vaccines. This is a matter, therefore, obviously of some considerable interest. There was a bit of a sensation because Bolsonaro, the sort of the Trump of the South, actually put out 2 tweets thanking China for its aid, which I don't think to be his real position. I take it to be he was under a great deal of pressure. The last of those articles I wrote with Marco Fernandez, who's Brazilian, and this, to give you the eye of interest, this got 111,000 hits. So it's not a totally marginal subject. That article should be published fairly soon in English. It's presently published in Chinese. Okay, just if I can give what I would interpret, or my interpretation of the situation why Bolsonaro is not under threat. It's because if you take, for example, the situation in Bolivia, the government was removed. The Morales government was moved by an external blow. It didn't have a big errors in policy. In Ecuador, and the left therefore rebounded quickly because it hadn't disorganized its own supporters. Also in Ecuador, it really is a betrayal by Lenin Moreno, but the Correa's policies weren't disproved. So therefore, I think the left recovered. I think my interpretation of the problem in Brazil would be the austerity policy pursued at the end of the Dilma government, which therefore disorganized the left. And that would be my interpretation of why Bolsonaro is not under threat of impeachment, because the left was somewhat disorganized. I mean, obviously, I'm totally against the coup and so against Dilma, but that's the real situation. That would be my view.
Yes, I agree with, but I would like to say the following. In terms of for PAC, that is the Brazilian vaccine, Brazilian vaccine, because we will mainly be vaccinated by this vaccine. It is not, and it was not a project of Bolsonaro. It was a project of the governor of São Paulo, that is Doria, because Bolsonaro always he already said that he will not take the vaccine. So he does not support the vaccine. The vaccine is a project of the state of São Paulo, and nowadays the state of São Paulo is sharing this vaccine with the whole country. But we depend on the inputs of China. We have a tension here because Bolsonaro and Bolsonaro has had many speeches against China. We have a problem here because Bolsonaro was many speeches. He is in good relations, not good. Cultivating good relations with China, but at the same time, in terms of vaccination, we depend of China. And I agree with you that after the impeachment of Dilma, the PT party started to be fragmented, and this is nowadays a reality, and this is part of the growth of Bolsonaro in the Congress. Last week, I heard to a PT congressman that said that nowadays we can believe in Bolsonaro. How can a PT congressman say that now we can believe in Bolsonaro?
Mm-hmm.
It is amazing. It is amazing. But what happened? They receive a lot of money from Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro bought many people in the Congress at the beginning of the year in order to change the leaders of the houses. And nowadays, he is stronger. He is strong. It is a reality. But you are completely right when you say this PT fragmentation started after Dilma, because then we have the Lava Jato, you have Lula in prison, then you have Haddad, that was the candidate from that he lost the election. So there were a lot of a sequence of events that indeed fragmented the PT. And now we have the PT fragmenting, and also the right wing of the political parties are also this wing is also fragmented. It's also so all this is favoring Bolsonaro. It is
Right.
it's amazing.
Carlos.
Thanks, Radhika, and thank you, Maria, for a really detailed and interesting presentation. I'd just like to ask, what's the Workers' Party's response to this situation? And you've covered it already to some degree in your last answer, but is there going to be a coherent strategy for regaining power? And connected to that, is there going to be some recognition of maybe some of the economic weaknesses and the limitations of the Lula and Dilma periods? As you pointed out, the level of redistribution was unprecedented, and in terms of the improved quality of life for poor people, that's something I believe that's never been experienced in the history of Brazil. But as you also pointed out, investment remained quite low. I think even at the best period, even in say 2010, never reached more than about 18%. And everybody seems to be agreed that 25% is more or less the minimum investment rate for achieving long-term sustainable growth. And for the sake of comparison, China's investment rate is currently 43%. And it's been higher than that. So does the PT have a concept for regaining power, and does it have a strategy for solving the country's problems once it's back in power? And just a small follow-up regarding Danielle's question regarding the slowdown 2013, 2014. Is it also the case, in addition to what you said, that that time period is about the time of the decline in international market prices of a lot of the primary commodities that were sustaining kind of the Brazil boom and the whole Latin America boom for the previous 10 years, because it's certainly simultaneous with the start of a very difficult period economically in Venezuela, which had had a period of historically high oil prices, and which has suffered since prices have been going down. And I wonder if that also impacts what's happened in Brazil. Thanks.
Many thanks, Carlos. It is curious, but the PT party has not presented any alternative to this mess. Any alternative to this mess. What is happening is that this week, Lula has said that the candidate for the next election that will be next year is Haddad. Is the same candidate that lost. But this is missing here in Brazil. We have no alternatives. We have no discussion of alternatives. The PT party that was historically very, very strong in giving alternatives in terms of economic policy nowadays is not doing this. What is happening is that nobody knows exactly where Lula is. Some people say that he is in Cuba, that is making some treatment because he was ill. He has had cancer in some years ago, and some people say that he's in Cuba making some treatments, and nobody knows exactly where. I think that he's not in Brazil, but Lula has no appeared in this pandemic to say a word, nothing at all. And then so the leaders of the party are completely outsiders nowadays. They are not saying no. Well, the media is not favoring the PT party, because the money of the government, they live with the money of the government. The media is not saying anything about the PT party, but we have so many now. We have the other kinds of communication, and we have no alternative presented by the PT party. What has been said is that Haddad will be the next the candidate. But this is you are right when you say, how is this happening? How more than 30% of the population is still supporting Bolsonaro? How can this happen nowadays? And with this 30% of the population, this 30% is saying that they are not going to take the vaccine because they believe in Bolsonaro, and they believe that they don't need to do this. So I need to say that that is why the PT party, I do not know what will happen with the PT party, because some research, these interviews this week are showing that if Lula if Lula and Bolsonaro, indeed, hypothetical, go to to the polls, then perhaps Bolsonaro could win the election. So because there is a threat that Bolsonaro, that Lula can bring to Brazil what is happening to Argentina nowadays. So the situation in Argentina is a threat to Brazil, and now many people are thinking that we can have a scenario, Argentinian scenario here. So they prefer to vote again in Bolsonaro in order to not to have this kind of scenario. So we are it is not easy what is happening here in terms of because the PT party is not helping. It's not helping with this. But you are completely right when you say what happened in 2014 is also part of the fall in the commodity price, but not only because the sustainability of the GDP was mainly credit and consumption after 2010. So why in 2014? Because of the change in the strategy of the public banks. But you are completely right that one of the reasons of the election, of the result of the election in 2018 was that the PT party did not accept that there were problems in the policy of the Dilma's period. Everybody was asking the PT party to realize that it was important to the population. The population should know that there were problems, but they were trying to manage this in a new way after 2018. No, they insist that the all was okay, that no problem at all. So that was really one of the problems of the DP part. There were no, as we say, they do not do this critique, some way in internal critique, and then this was part of the result of the election. Thanks, Carlos.
Okay, I guess my question got answered in all these wonderful questions. So are there any other questions for Maria? If Alan, go ahead.
Just one, in terms of the political fragmentation, because the states, it seems to me, the provinces in Brazil have always been important. So I want to know whether there are any signs of any political forces in any of the provinces that are putting forward something that could result in a better policy for the PT or for another party.
Yes, so you're completely right. This fragmentation is not only in terms of the political parties, but also in terms of the provinces. The provinces. In São Paulo, we have the Doria that is part of it, but the political party of Doria is not relevant, but he would like to be president. And there's another important force in Minas Gerais, it's another province, that there is a new party there, that is Partido Novo, that also would like to be president candidate. So we have these two references but if you interview people most of the people do not know who are these governors of the provinces. So they that is the problem. They do not know. They have no national participation in the. So they are very local power. So you have pressure in terms of the future of the election, but at the same time, you know that the power is local. It's not national. So Bolsonaro knows this, that they have no national power. These two people, Doria and this Zena, that is from Minas Gerais. So I do not know. This is not the do not know if in 1 year and a half they can get this national power. Only if they try to get a very good VP, vice president, and then they perhaps, but it is not, it will not be easy, because there are many concerned with the local also problems, because they have to complete the vaccination, they have to engage in this vaccination. How they are going to complete the vaccination at the same time prepare a new candidate, big candidates for the election? So it is not, there is the pressure, but I do not know if this will grow until 2000 until next year. But a good question, Alan.
I have one more question and I have two more questions, but then we should wrap this up. Oscar and then Aurelia.
Yes, Maria, after everything you have said, I just think, one, what is the link between Bolsonaro and Trump? Two, you had Steve Bannon going to Brazil repeatedly, and what was that about? And three, when Bolsonaro went to Washington to do the state visit to Trump, his first stop was at the CIA. What is going on in Brazil?
Yes. We know this, that we are linked. That is why this tension between China. That is why the relationship between Brazil China is not so clear, because of this relationship with the United States. That was I do not know what is going to happen in this Biden period, but there is a link with the Trump business, I think, with the Trump business. I do not know exactly. We do not know it exactly. It's interesting because this is not discussed in Brazil because there's so many problems here that this relations with Trump is not being a many topic in the agenda nowadays. But this is a problem in terms of the because they say it is very the management of the crisis of the pandemic was very similar. They both of them negating the pandemic. The number of deaths is very high in the United States and in Brazil, but I do not know which are the financial links, because there should be financial links between Bolsonaro's family and Trump's business.
Okay.
And many people say that the Bolsonaro's family is organizing a kind of parallel force, the militia, we said here, parallel force, military force, and they need a lot of money to prepare this, to organize this military force. And perhaps we can have this relation between Trump's business and this parallel military force that is being organized in Brazil. Is being organized mainly in Rio de Janeiro, where Bolsonaro's family is the origin of Bolsonaro's family. This is a very important topic in Brazil nowadays. What is happening in terms of the structure of power that is being organized in terms of a parallel system by Bolsonaro?
I have to say that's alarming, not least because I've done a lot of reading on fascism, and I just like to say that to me, the distinctive characteristic of fascism as a type of authoritarian rule is precisely the organization of para-state force to impose control. So to me, this is quite alarming. Anyway, Aurelia, you have a question.
Maria, what about the other parties, left parties, PNDB, Partido Socialista de Marina? You are not thinking about building an alliance against Bolsonaro?
No.
There is nothing about that?
Nothing.
In fact, my question that I was going to ask was connected with that. From your charts, it's very clear that what you really need actually is a fairly socialistic program in which there is a huge role for the state in in bringing up the level of investment, and whether any economists are recommending it, any political forces are taking it up, because what you are experiencing already before the pandemic was a collapse of investment, and they tried the credit route. That is now exhausted, so there is no other way but massive state investment to bring up the rate of growth.
Yes. There is no, Ariela, a very good question, and Radhika, but there is no signs of coalition among the other. Marina is not participating in the political scenario. And this was one of the causes of Bolsonaro's election, because there was no possibility of coalition in 2018, and nowadays the same scenario continues, because everybody would like to be president. There is no as accept to be part of the government, no as president, but as part of the government. So this is not happening. There are no conversations at all in terms of this kind of coalition. This was that is why the fragmentation. We have the fragmentation. We will continue with this fragmentation, and this is what Bolsonaro wants. No, well, let's continue with this fragmentation in order to avoid any kind of coalition that can prevent his re-election, because I think that he's going to be re-elected if we continue like this.
Well, thank you so much. I think that was really very, very informative and thought-provoking. So thank you very much.